You're in the hands of an adolescent.
It's mystery. I don't like mysteries. Get bellyache. I got a duty right now.
Aye, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Warp Core Podcast. I am Urza Master. With me, as always, is Lord Uther, and joining us today, Lloyd Dobler.
Well, you know me.
Welcome, Lloyd.
I will say anything with this crowd, so I'm looking forward
Hello.
Heyo. And we are back with Star Trek Picard, Season 3, and possibly one of the most talked about television episodes of all time. That is episode 9 of Season 3. We are one episode to go, so the finale is up next. And let's just say that this episode brought a lot to the table and gave us a lot to unpack, to say the least. So, as always, I will turn it over to our friend Lloyd Dobler to give us a little background on the episode and to walk us through some of the more interesting points. Take it away, Lloyd.
Thank you, Ursa Master. Thank you, Lord Uther, and thanks to you at home. Tonight, we're going to unpack Episode 9 of Star Trek Picard Season 3, Voxed. Who are the players involved this week? Behind the scenes, we had two co-writers. Kylie Rossiter and Sean Tretta were our scriptors. And Terry Matalas, showrunner, is the director. He will also reprise his directorial role next week for the finale, and he will also write the finale solo. So it's all Matalas all the time leading into the grand finale. Kylie Rossiter is a staff writer who has been on the show since season 2, co-wrote one episode last season. It was the third episode of the second season, which was titled Assimilation, directed by Leah Thompson. And if you recall, it's the episode in which Picard and the La Sirena made it back to 2024 LA, and then all hell broke loose. And they were scattered across modern-day Los Angeles trying to get their bearings to undo the timeline damage. So she was part of that. And then Sean Tretta got... basically, he's been a staff writer for this season, had done 2 episodes. The second episode of this season, Disengage, that's the one where the Titan appeared and saved the Crushers and fled into the nebula, pursued by Vadic and the Shrike, and Worf appeared to save Raffi from the Ferengi criminal Sneed. He also co-wrote No Win Scenario, which was the 4th episode of this season, and that was the big Picard flashback telling all the Starfleet kids all about his adventures, blowing off his son unwittingly, and the jellyfish birth that helped save the Titan from the Shrike. So they've been around the block a few times. This is their only co-writing episode together. And as Ursa Master said, they brought a lot to the table, and they brought it like that. So, without further ado, let's get into the major points here. How do you solve a problem like Jack Crusher? Well, with the help of our favorite Beta Z counselor, we start unlocking doors of the mind. And what's behind door number 3? Yes, that's right. The age-old, eternal Star Trek villain, a floating Borg cube, punctuated by a delicious voice cameo from none other than the Borg Queen herself, Alice Kriege, which eagle-eared viewers will recognize. Didn't see her face, but we certainly caught those tones that we remember so well from 1996's First Contact. Jack is a Borg baby. That's the source of his mysterious powers, things we've actually never seen a Borg do, and we'll get into that. But he is genetically enhanced, and so all roads lead back to the collective. And so that is the big reveal at long last for Beverly and Jean-Luc's offspring. We'll talk about how we feel about that in just a few moments. That wasn't the only thing that they sprung on us this episode. They also pulled the rug out from under us as far as the big bads of the season. Because while we had been led to believe and had been going along with the storyline of rogue changelings who were tortured by Section 31 and were out to take their revenge and operating a plot to disrupt Frontier Day and the Federation, and that they had infiltrated Starfleet at all accounts, and much like a John Carpenter remake of The Thing, they could be anyone at any time, your friends, your neighbors, your commanding officer. Seemingly that plot line has now been jettisoned, much like Vadic, the hunter for hire and changeling who was jettisoned out into deep space and turned into tiny bits. Suddenly the Borg have reclaimed their lead, and it is their nefarious deeds that we are now forced to counteract in the final 2 episodes. So I begin the discussion with this, and I have been anxiously awaiting all day Lord Uther's first thoughts and notes on this. Number 1, Locutus, Jack, the Borg Queen, the Borg themselves. We've been talking all season how, boy, I hope they don't go down that path, and I hope we go a different direction. And Ursa Master has convincingly created an alt-universe writing room for us with some fantastic Easter eggs and directions and things. And that's the beauty of doing shows like this, where we can bounce ideas around the whiteboard and do that. But we now see what path the writers and the creators have chosen, and it's not necessarily the one we envisioned when we started on this journey 9 episodes ago. So how do we feel about this revelation and the fact that the Changeling storyline, while still very effective and handled extremely well, as we've discussed, now seemingly is going to take a back seat to some late Borg shenanigans on Frontier Day and so forth? Do you feel like we were building to this all along? We should have seen it coming. Is there a slight sense of betrayal in the sense that this isn't quite what we were promised? I'm anxious to hear how fans react in terms of what they're seeing, in terms of this is a very big narrative pivot, very late in the season, but still, manages to grab our attention. So I throw it out to Lord Uther first. What'd you think?
Well, Jack Cutis,
Nice.
who we now have. Thank you.
Nice.
Been working on that one all day. Takes me all day to come up with that, actually. This just hit me, too. We kind of have a little bit of a Battlestar Galactica line going on here, in my opinion. I know one of us hasn't seen it. Spoiler alert. Don't worry, Urza Master. There's more to it than that. You'll love it. But I almost feel like some of that's been woven in there to go along with what Urza Master has said. They talk about leaving doors open at the end of the season. I'm wondering if the door opening is going to be the Changeling plot, because they can obviously wrap up the Borg piece next episode. I have some ideas of how they're going to probably do that. And you could use the Changelings, the Dominion piece, to launch a new series, possibly. Or another mini, maybe that's Picard season 4 is going to be them unraveling this whole Changeling debacle, because you've only got 1 episode left that you've got to. Do you want my complaints? I'll hold off on the complaints.
No.
Well, I guess I just did, because I talked about Jack Cutis. So you're telling me, you're all telling me out there that Admiral Shelby, who has been in charge of the Borg stuff from day 1, is going to allow all the ships to be. I'm sorry, Urza Master, but that's also a plot line from Battlestar Galactica. You're going to allow all these ships to be internetworked. so they can all act as one. So you're going to tell me Admiral Shelby was like completely on board with that? Really? So I struggle with that a little bit. It seemed too convenient. I think if they would have just stuck with the changeling piece, again, unless they have this set up for season 4, I would have felt better about it, I guess. I feel like it was all this build up, and now we're not going to kind of see that come to fruition. And I just don't know why we have to go back to the Borg. I think it would have been a better spin, which maybe it'll still happen, if the Borg would have teamed up with the Federation, which is kind of like what season 2 was hinting at a little bit. And then doesn't happen. And now what's going to happen? Jack's going to go to the Borg. He's going to fight. He's going to act like he's all Borgy, and then he's going to defeat him. And I just don't. That's going to. I'm going to struggle with that. If he winds up acting like he's a Borg and it defeats them. I thought it was kind of cool, the whole idea that maybe the Borg have been planning this for a while. I was really against that at first. Been feeling a little bit better about it as the day has gone on. But I just don't know why you got to go to the Borg well again. I don't see the need for that when they had done it so many times. Now, again, as a credit to the I'm sorry, I'll stop at some point, I promise. As a credit to the writers, extremely creative with how they could keep it interesting that the Borg are still a part of this. I will give them that. Rewriting, and to me it's almost like a nanite thing and all this other stuff, right? The DNA. Yeah.
And infecting the transporters.
I'm struggling with some of the pieces. I'm sorry?
And infecting the transporters. That was another major piece that I thought actually, that's an insidious plot point no matter what version of Trek you're debating. The idea that anyone who's been through there basically is getting this automatic DNA resequencing, but only for the youngs, only for the Gen Zers of Starfleet. All the olds are protected. So in our case, we'd be fine. But you're setting up a classic, boomer seniors versus the wet behind the ears 25-year-olds. And so that, to me, was like a real stroke of luck there. But also, real quick, just as you mentioned Shelby, I discovered today that the actress, Elizabeth Dennehy, whom we only have seen in The Best of Both Worlds Part 1 and 2, as well, I guess, as she might be on Star Trek Lower Decks in the background somewhere. But we haven't seen her since that definitive 2-parter of Next Generation. She is the daughter of veteran character actor Brian Dennehy, and I tell you, he doesn't need an introduction. But yes, it was very cool to see her, and then equally dispiriting to see her go away very quickly. So, much like Ensign Rowe, apparently we just bring back Trek figures from the past, and then we wipe them out before the end credits have settled there. But anyways.
With all that being said, and then I'm going to give it to Urzmaster because he's been extremely patient, probably because he has the coolest haircut like mine, is I will put up with all of that to see my favorite crew back on the bridge of the Enterprise D. So I can live with it because that was the payoff. With that, I will turn it over to my brother, the master.
So much to say. So very much to say. I actually have mixed feelings for probably the first time in this whole series about the big Borg reveal. I feel it's a little too easy. But I go back to what Terry Matalas said, like in episode 5 when he was being interviewed, and he said, it's really not that huge of a reveal. And that tipped me off immediately that it's probably the Borg. And then, of course, the fan theories have been flying ever since about the Borg being the big bad behind the big bad. And I didn't want to believe that with the writing we've seen this season, which has been like literally the tip-top phenomenal shape, would take this easy way out. Now, we have one episode to go, and a lot to resolve in one episode, and they leave doors open. So there's a few paths I think that they could take in the last episode that would make this extraordinarily successful. One, we have nuggets of 7 of 9 having the capabilities of playing Borg Queen from Season 1, who could potentially play some instrumental role in turning things around. They've been sort of pairing her and Jack up. They've been kind of jacking her off the whole season.
Not what you did.
And I really do feel like that is a component to which they could structure something that leaves doors open. She ends up being the rescue key to Jack. They fly off into the sunset into their own series. Captain Seven, Sub-Commander Jack or something like that. Who knows? There's that possibility. There's also the possibility, which I think is the easiest way out, is there's some emotional moment where the Borg Queen is clearly manipulating Jack. Picard shows him, this is what they did to me. They're killing everybody you know, all your friends. Maybe they kill off Dr. Crusher. Maybe they kill Picard. And Jack has this emotional snap where he seizes control of the Borg, basically puts him down, and there's your resolution. There's a third path. There are multiple ways they could write themselves out of this and make it cool. The second path I'm not such a fan of, but the third path is the oldies go back. They try to convince Jack to put an end to all this. He doesn't. But let's not forget that in Season 2, this huge armada of Delta Quadrant Borg came into the Alpha Quadrant out of a temporal vortex. They're still there for all we know. Do they step in and play Deus Ex Machina, and now Picard's deeds through the first 3 seasons wind up in this big payoff where it's Borg versus Borg, Borg allied with Old Guard Federation overcomes New Guard Federation and Old Borg, which I think is interesting.
Wow.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I didn't mean to interrupt your thought process. I wholeheartedly apologize.
It's all good.
Because this is where I got confused, and now you're helping me. So are you telling me that where Jack was going is a new strain of Borg, and that where we left the scientist, I'm sorry, Girardi, that she was the OG Borg? So there's 2 variants of Borg?
Flip that around. The OG Borg were in a transwarp conduit hub. That's where Jack went. Kind of like in Voyager, how they get back to the Alpha Quadrant. It's in a big nebula. That's where Jack goes. It's a hub. Through that transwarp conduit comes classic Borg cube. Now, the way that the Neo Borg came through in Season 2 was in a temporal anomaly, and that opened up, and Girardi's Borg came through. Very different Borg.
With a kick-ass,
So
yeah.
you have...
Got it.
Yep.
Thank you. That's a huge help. And honestly, it might be a help for fans, too, because I could see there being confusion.
Yeah.
So
I don't think this is a retcon of the Borg that we knew from Season 2. I think this is just the Borg that was already in this timeline, and Girardi's Borg is an offshoot temporal anomaly Borg. That's one possibility.
I'd love to see her come.
It is possible they just retcon the Borg, and they're just ignoring it. Option number 4. This is where they go back with the Enterprise D, and they start using their tactical advantage of age against the Borg, their knowledge of the Borg and the Borg vulnerabilities, basically to whip wholesale ass on a few key assets through the fleet with the help of Data, LaForge, who know the fleet, who have the android capability. They come together, liberate just enough of the fleet, and all the meanwhile, they're working on a way to basically antidote this DNA change, broadcast it out, and now all of a sudden all I got to do is blow up one Borg cube and somehow save Jack. Option number 4. There is an option number 5.
this is the one that you want.
This is the one that I really want to see.
I know it is.
Such a vindication.
I know you do. Go
Everything
ahead.
I've been saying all along. Option number 5. The changelings who alerted Worf to what was going on are now alerted to what's happening with the Federation. And if the Federation falls to the Borg, what's to stop the Borg from assimilating virtually everything, right?
Right.
While the changelings in the Gamma Quadrant have an ace in their hole. The literal hole that connects the two quadrants. And what's in that hole? The Cisco.
Okay.
They could recruit basically the prophets or, their emissary, the Cisco with his godlike powers, to come in and save the day in maybe the Delta Flyer, maybe some other type of ship, maybe the Vorta make an appearance, and they come with Jem'Hadar, who would whip wholesale ass of the Borg pretty much hand-to-hand anyway. Or maybe the offshoot changelings that joined the genetically altered changelings still want changeling and Dominion dominance. They enter the game to basically usurp the victory from the Borg. Now those two are fighting it out, while Enterprise D is giving it to the Borg Queen. And basically it's one ship to one ship. Cube versus Enterprise D. That is a much fairer match than all that other shit that's happening. We also haven't seen Admiral Janeway. Very big component of defeating the Borg. Very high possibility there. There is a 6th option. And I hate to bring it up because they did it in Season 2, but it makes sense here. They're going to Earth. They're going to see what's happening. They're going to see it getting blasted to oblivion. No way out. There's no way this old ship's going to be able to handle it. It's no better than a 20-year-old Klingon bird of prey. But what can a 20-year-old Klingon bird of prey do? Slingshot around the sun. And they can travel back in time with the proper calculations from Data and Geordi. Take that Enterprise D crew back to first contact. And whoop wholesale ass of the Borg right then and there. Option number 6. So, okay, I don't know that any of those options are really going to happen. I have a feeling...
Wait a minute. You mean there's no option 7? I'm sorry. I find this hard to believe after going through 6 of them.
Hey, I could keep going, but...
Oh, I know you could. I'm messing
my
with
option
you.
7 is Pac-Man. I really, truly think that they're going to go with probably option number 2.
I agree.
One of the two parents is going to die, and that is going to be the emotional breaking point for Jack. It's probably going to be Dr. Crusher, because remember, Picard has a new love interest, and we know Crusher and Picard are not going to be a thing. So that would be the easy kill-off to free up Jack. Now he gets to have the father he never had, and he's the only parent left, so by default he's probably going to be there, and that's the doors that are left open. And it's going to be Jack overpowers the Borg Queen because, young, dumb, full of cum thinks he can do it, and it turns out, yeah, he can. My biggest beef with all of this is that if they do it that way and they don't basically have a payoff with the new Borg we got last season, have they just basically shit on seasons 1 and 2? What was all that for? Well, we do have we do have Rafi and 7 on the Titan. I still think 7 is somehow key to the resolution here. Getting the Titan into the fold. Maybe they get some subterfuge together and figure out a way to undo the DNA damage. Just an idea. But as disappointing as it may be for them to sort of use this continual villain and storyline, I think it's appropriate because it's Picard, and who's Picard's biggest nemesis from day 1?
Q.
It's the Borg.
Oh,
well, yeah, it's Q, but they can't use Q because
I had to do that. I couldn't help myself.
I'd love it if somehow Q came back, or Q2 or something along those lines. But I got a real bone to pick with this episode. Because not only did we see the untimely, assuming death of Admiral Shelby, but we got the death of course,
Liam
Captain
Shaw.
Shaw. And while I feel like his dying words and that passing of the torch moment, I mean, that was Pike to Kirk-esque, if we're talking Calvin timeline. You know, that, it's a trope. It felt very genuine. I really enjoyed it. My problem is they basically just forced themselves on Shaw and emasculated him out of a job, and then, you know, he becomes a bit player by dying in this episode. And I feel shitty about that because there's such potential there
Oh, yes.
for him to have
Oh, God.
way more
Yep.
than this,
Yep.
which I will say does support the idea of time travel in the final episode, because that is a way they could bring Shaw back. There's also the chance that, you know, maybe he wasn't as injured as it came across, or they make him a synthetic.
Get him into some
Lots of
back.
possibilities. Back to immersion always works. It worked for Luke like 3 times if you read the
Jam.
books.
And Boba Fett.
Boba Fett is
And Boba Fett.
It's that
He had to
whole
blast
episode.
himself out of the Sarlacc pit.
soaking it up. No, the
So
Metalis is on the record as saying he was caught unawares by how much fans pivoted towards Shaw. How they started off hating him, and then by the end of it, they were absolutely in love with him and expected him to, you know, top line multiple series spin-offs. And so he's the first to admit that
Because that's how good the writing was.
he's the first to admit that he was a little surprised by the fan reaction to the positive, because there has been some grousing in the last 12 hours about, what are you doing killing Shaw? He says he will be in the next episode, but he also insists he will be dead. So, I mean, however that plays out. I'm with Ursa Master that, you know, again, if they have medical technology and so forth, we'll put them on ice and, you know, whatever. This idea of the
Oh, God.
the Borg nanotechnology, whatever, inside of us because we've been transporting everywhere. That's fascinating in the sense if you just take a baby step backwards, does that mean then that a plurality of Starfleet, you know, just whatever race they happen to be from, human or otherwise, Vulcan, Klingon, are they now basically all Locutus? I mean, or, you know, a junior grade version, you know, ready to be snapped like that? Is that basically, and it's not so much about how they might resolve that in the next episode, the final episode of the season, but like the characters in the Marvel universe that were, you know, blipped out and turned into ash and then returned 5 years later, and how the shows, the streaming shows and the movies have kind of tried to deal with the fallout of that. Like, you know, wait, I was gone for 5 years, you know, like, I'm curious if Star Trek going forward in any incarnation might possibly address the PTSD or something, the idea knowing that these guys all were basically, you know, junior versions of Locutus, you know, and it spread everywhere. I mean, it's galaxy wide, you know, when you think of Starfleet representation. So I throw that out there as something to chew on, you know, not just for, again, the resolution of this storyline, but in future storylines that they could tease, you know, on, you know, in this timeline or any others, if they do a legacy or they do another miniseries or a season 4. Like, that would be something I would like to see potentially looked at, you know, like, wow. I mean, Geordie's daughters, both, you know, I mean, we see them on the bridge in their CGI makeup and stuff. I mean, that's the same thing that happened to Jean-Luc, and we see how it messed him up. So that was something to chew on there.
So, what do you think? 2 questions. Would either of you have an issue with them just completely closing the door on the Borg and being done with them? Do you? Let me rephrase that question. Sorry, Council. Let me rephrase that. Do you think they're ever going to close the door and just be done with them?
I don't.
Like, never use them again? No. I mean, I think they will.
Yeah, I mean, don't you think they've gone to the well one too many times on this? I mean, I get what you're saying about. I will say this: your argument about this is really what Jean-Luc Picard is in a sense. I will buy that for $1. I'll buy that argument. But don't you feel like they've constantly gone to the well.
I don't. I think, in a way, this is really nice writing because season 1 really was about the Borg in a big way. And season 2, of course, was about the Borg. Season 3 is about the Borg. The whole show is called Picard. And again, Picard and the Borg pretty much go hand in hand. I mean, they're literally written into each other's DNA.
Right.
Heyo.
Yeah.
So my thought here is there's a couple of unique things that they can do with this post Picard, assuming, of course, that the Borg are defeated and not just altered, because there is the possibility that Jack simply finds a way to overcome the Borg and just cuts off all of the biological Borg, if you will, from the collective and from the Queen, and sacrifices himself to cut them off so that they can't be essentially turned on anymore. Of course, Riker will always be able to be turned on. But I think that's actually, if we want to talk more options, that's a legitimate option. And Jack, in doing that, would be able to universally rescue Starfleet, and that's your denouement, basically, is now they're mourning Jack, this human who always felt out of place, always had these thoughts and abilities and things he couldn't explain, put everybody in this horrible situation and ended up saving the day. And he only did so because his time with Picard informed him about his humanity and blah, 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 blah. There's plenty there that they could do. I go back to 7 of 9 being so key in basically stealing the Borg cube in season 1. To me, it all feels like a setup. Like, they've always been playing at the Borg. It's Picard's penultimate villain. Because Q really isn't a villain. I mean, and all things considered, he that's why the payoff at the end of season 2 was what it was, and not some big showdown with the Borg. Although that felt like the season they were going to do it. There's so much possibility here, and that nice thing is, no matter how they resolve it, there's about 8 other ways they could have done it that still could be a series in the future, or an antagonist in the future. I still think that if you completely, let's just say, wash out the Borg, cut off the Picard versus Borg story here, the Borg are still out there. Even if there is no more collective, no more Queen, there's always going to be rogue cubes, rogue spheres. Some of them will self-destruct, some of them won't make it. Some of them will go, the route of, what's his name? Huey Lewis in the News. Hugh. They'll go his way, and they'll become liberated Borg. Some of them will have their implants taken out, and they'll be, restored from Borg, ex-Borgs. And then there may be mini collectives who might try to reestablish a greater collective. And that, in and of itself, could be a compelling story for a legacy crew to face down later. Maybe not the arch nemesis they are now, but certainly an impactful villain for, say, exploring the Delta Quadrant. Which, again, you've had one ship go through the Delta Quadrant ever at this point. There's a really strong possibility that they could do that again in another series, and there's plenty of territory to cross there. I think you have to look at this from the perspective as Terry Matalas is running this show, thinking, this is it. We'll leave doors open for future people to come in and write or run a show. Maybe Terry Matalas wants to come back, but there's no plans on the table right now other than Starfleet Academy, which could take place in any era and wouldn't necessarily be married to one or the other. So, I'm fine if this is it for the Borg, but I really don't think it needs to be. I think there's still stories you could tell. They might not be as big or potent, but they could definitely be decent stories.
The
Hey, Lloyd,
yeah,
I got a quick question for you.
okay.
do they, when the season is over, do they jump ahead 150 years or 75 years and start anew, or do they take the Titan with 7 and 9 and continue these voyages in a sense? And do they go that route, or do you put a new crew on the Enterprise F that just launched? What do you think there, Lloyd?
You were anticipating some of my next comments. Thank you.
Wonderful.
I think that the fan interest right now, particularly goosed by this season, is in the early 25th century in this timeline. So I think, again, irrespective of Starfleet Academy or Strange New Worlds or anything that's ongoing right now, if they decide to launch a new series, I think I like, we have talked about, doing what Next Gen did to the original series and bringing it far-flung enough to have a whole new canvas to paint on. And I think that that's a very realistic and would be a great way to bring in a whole next generation of fans who could have their own crew and their own ship and their own misadventures throughout the galaxy, Alpha, Delta, Gamma, whichever quadrant you want to explore. But I think if we're thinking short term, and sometimes these studios are driven by short term thoughts, you think about how they're, think about the other big franchise Paramount is nurturing right now, which is Yellowstone, and all the Taylor Sheridan. You've got your mothership, and you've got all these different spin-offs at different points, in the 1800s and the early 1900s, and there's going to be one in the 50s coming up, and there's going to be probably a spin-off of the mothership now because they can't get Kevin Costner to come back to work. So, I mean, if you just look at how they manage expectations in franchises now, I think the more likelier than not, if they decide to greenlight a new series, it's going to be probably very much in this 2501, 2502 stardate realm. And again, because I think that's where the fans, I think that's just, if you took a poll of the fans right now, I think that's where most of them are at in terms of what they kind of want to see. What they kind of want to see is, the storytelling that Ursa Master has been bringing up, mid-90s Berman Star Trek, getting some of those faces and places and plot points back into the mix to make it feel like a more intricately woven tapestry. So, that's the show I'm going to sign up to watch if it happens. So, a couple of...
Do you put them on the...
Go ahead.
Do you put them on the new Enterprise, or do you put them on the Titan?
And that's, to me, the Titan's a beautiful ship. And I'm surprised how much I was taken with it as we saw it throughout the season. And
I agree.
I think the Titan, when 7 of 9 barks that they, unload on the Shrike and you see those red torpedoes slamming into her. I mean, that's as thrilling a moment as Hikaru Sulu giving the Excelsior to the Bird of Prey there, giving them the big...
Shields!
So, by the way, another death in this. We've talked about Admiral Shelby and Captain Shaw. Let us not forget the USS Excelsior, at least for the moment, has passed. But if you give Geordi about 20 years in the garage, he might be able to patch something up there. So, I want to turn our discussion...
He's got time.
He's got time. Commodore's got time. I want to turn our discussion briefly to the ships of the line, because we were treated to 2 of them in this episode. And for the special effects, nostalgia fans, they were glorious reveals for all different reasons. I want to talk the exteriors, and then we'll talk about the interior of, the big D energy, the NCC 1701D. But first, the Enterprise F. I know you guys have been waiting for it since the season kicked off. We finally got it coming out of space dock. Fireworks exploding and the other ships in the background. We didn't get to spend too much time on her. Maybe next episode. Who knows? But what did we think briefly of our pass with Enterprise F? And then promise me that you were in a well-darkened room, or at least had plenty of good cinematic lighting when the lights of the museum space dock snapped on, and you could finally see Geordi's what he's been tinkering on the weekends come to life. Were you pretty much assured that that was going to happen? Did any of it take you by surprise? And even seeing the interior of the bridge, which, as Riker pointed out, it did to me, looked a little small. Based on all these other bridges we've seen for the Enterprise E and the other shows, I was like, wow, look at how you come down from that upper deck there to the chairs, and like, look how much open space there is, more of a living room set versus the sleekness of the Titan.
Yeah.
I mean, so go ahead and start jumping in on your thoughts on the ships of the line, because, I mean, it was a doozy.
I was going to default to Urza Master.
I'll take that one.
Okay.
I really enjoyed the Enterprise F. I was pretty much guessing it was going to be Shelby at captain, or in the captain's chair. I hope to see more of the Enterprise F in the next episode. I'm sure we probably will. I feel like they wouldn't miss that opportunity. I really hope the next show features the Enterprise. Not Starfleet Academy, of course, but the next Star Trek show should be an Enterprise-based show. I like the Titan, but there's something about Star Trek and an Enterprise.
Yeah.
We haven't had one in such a long time. I feel like it's overdue. It's, 30 years since they've had a TV series with the Enterprise as the ship. Make it so. I do think it looks sleek. It looks nice. It reminds me of the E in a lot of ways. But nothing beats the Enterprise D. I mean, seeing the Enterprise D back in its full glory, it wasn't just nostalgia talking. That's a very pretty ship. It's built well. And for them to mention Viridian 3, loved it. Loved it, loved it, loved it. Obviously, they exhumed Kirk's body from Viridian 3, so it makes perfect sense. They exhumed the body of the Enterprise. I really think that it was fun that they injected the comic moments, even though, this was such, a tense, ordeal that they're going through. But Worf saying, I much prefer the weapons on the Enterprise. Or Fraser Banks, and they're like, Worf.
Data greeting his chair.
Picard saying, I miss the carpet. Yeah, greeting the chair. But then just everybody snapping back to their roles on the bridge. The feel of the bridge. It just felt right. And compelling. And that's where it's like, Jonathan Frakes was in an interview very early on in the series, or in this season, and they said, can you give us any hints about how this season plays out? And he said, nobody dies. And he said, is that fact or fiction? And it's like, oh man, don't cock tease us like that. I really hope nobody from the Enterprise D dies. The crew that's on that bridge right now, I hope they all make it. I would actually really like to see them have an Enterprise D-based show. Whether that's a season 4 of Picard where they get back to Earth in the next episode and they're like, oh shit, we're not going to be able to do anything here. We have to get out of here and go recruit help. And then they go to the Klingons, and they go to the Vulcans, and they go to the Breen, and the Changelings, the Cisco, the Cardassians, and they say, we need to beat the Borg Federation. Maybe the Kazons will come from the Delta Quadrant. I don't know. I just think that would make an incredible series. The only thing is I know that the Borg work a hell of a lot faster than that, and there's no way it would last.
Right.
But I'd love to see it. That also being said, this is their moment to conquer in the end and take the Enterprise D out for one last spin around the stars. This is their Star Trek 6 moment. And that's why I see a resolution similar to Star Trek 6. But again, that was not the final goodbye to every TOS, character. We saw them again in later films and TV episodes. There's always going to be those possibilities. I guess at this point the future's with Rafi and Seven, which kind of bites because I don't really care for Rafi as a character. She still seems like a throwaway. I just don't care about her.
Yeah.
I think this season,
and that's because they haven't invested.
Yeah, I think this season she has taken a step back as far. I mean, think about the character stuff. The first season, she's a drug addict and she leans on Picard. In the second season, she's got the romance kindling with Seven, and I mean, I feel like Rafi is, and I mean, she got paid, so I'm sure she's fine with it. But in their quest to cover all the bases and give us everything we want, it's kind of a disservice to the character, really. She's really just become, basically a functioning ensign type. When they were fleeing, when Shaw took the hit and they were fleeing on the shuttle to get away, like, she's just like, go Picard. Like, and you say to yourself, well, they spent so much time together in the first two seasons. They were close. They were arguably as close as Riker and Picard were in the original Next Generation show. I don't know. I just feel that character has suffered somewhat. And not that I'm complaining, that it would take away from our Datas and our Geordies and our Troys and everything else. That's who we signed up to see. But I still think that character is a little tough there. That moment that you just described as they take it around the stars, very Star Trek 6, I got a very Search for Spock moment, albeit without stealing it right from underneath Starfleet's noses. They go on this darkened bridge. It's literally they're the only crew members on board, presumably. And
Right.
Picard's like, I can't ask you to join me, all of this and risk your lives. And they're all like,
Yep.
I mean, so again, and I know that was intentional, but then pulling slowly, majestically out, and I just feel like there was a very deliberate throw the dart at Star Trek 3 there, which is a great moment in the original film, the first 6 films. That's one of my favorites. We've talked about that, the theft of the Enterprise, but this was so. And I thought it got a short shrift. I mean, it got 2/3 of Generations, and then Troy crashed it into the Viridian 3. Like, I feel like that show, I feel like it should have had more big screen adventures. So, I mean, it is nice to kind of maybe, just like Nemesis left Data in limbo until this show, now maybe the Enterprise D can come out, phasers firing and saucer separating. Will we get a saucer separation? What's the over-under on that?
Will we get an Enterprise exploding? That's the thing. I really think we see the Enterprise F blow up.
Wow.
Before they set the sun on this one.
Okay.
I hate to say it, but I agree with you.
I think that's going to be the ultimate payoff, is old versus new, and the Enterprise D is going to show it's still got the shit to get the job done. And shiny new Enterprise F becomes the catalyst. Sorry, bye-bye. I don't know. I'm very excited for Episode 10. I think Episode 9 leaves us with a lot of mixed feelings, but so did Episode 7. And what I would say is, as much as that was a two-parter, this very well could be another two-parter-esque episode.
Oh, yeah.
Where Episode 10 may assuage all of our concerns.
Right.
And it could be, and I'm so happy I get to make this reference right now, it could be the Omega-13 moment, where the Enterprise D makes their slingshot maneuver around the sun just to go back far enough to correct the actions. I mean, that ties us back into First Contact, ties us back into Generations a bit, ties us back into, a lot of the well that they keep dipping into anyway. I mean, there's so many callbacks, from sounds and music to lines here and there to tropes to, everything is laced with nostalgia but presents it in a new and exciting way. And there is that possibility that is how they denouement this, is they basically go back in time to fix whatever mistake first was made, and then when they loop back and get back to the correct time, they are there for Frontier Day and it goes off without a hitch. And the Enterprise D is there to, like, sort of see you. But I think, honestly, I think we've kind of crossed every bridge we need to cross with this episode, if I'm not speaking out of turn. Should we rate this out of 7 warp cores now?
Well, I have a
Yes.
quick question for both of you. With the finale and so much at stake, are you okay with the 47-minute finale? Do you want to see a supersized? Most of these shows kind of stay within, 47, 51 minutes. I mean, would you be okay with, or do you think Paramount would be okay with giving us another 10 minutes or so, an hour?
Give me an hour 15.
Yeah, I mean, like
An hour
almost
15.
a mini movie, if you will. Not quite long as a feature, but a little bit longer than a...
I mean, the special effects are on par with any movie that I've been seeing. I mean, it's just like watching
Wars.
Okay.
Mandalorian. Mandalorian's been pretty good.
I haven't seen the latest episode.
Oh,
And
Oh.
I've only gotten about 10 minutes in.
oh my, is all I have to say to that. Because
well,
after watching that last episode of The Mandalorian, I went out and bought 4 new Mandalorian figures because I was so pumped up from that episode. So they got my monies.
There's dramatically less Lizzo in the episode you're going to be watching. So
Is there more Bo-Katan? Because that's all I care about.
she's all
Yes,
over the
Gary.
joint, so.
Awesome.
Do you think she's,
one more
do you think
thing
she's
before we
cuter,
go to
Lord
rating.
Uther, do you think she's cuter in Battlestar or The Mandalorian? With a little age on her now. Katie Sackhoff. I'm curious. Did you like her as a young Starbuck, or do you like her now as a seasoned?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
We
I'll
might
take
want
them
to
both.
save that for the Star Wars podcast.
I'll take them both. Anyway, one more point. I do think it's interesting that they could put the Enterprise D back together, but Worf said it wasn't his fault about the E being crashed apart.
Do we
and
not
they
know
couldn't
how
fix
that
that
happened?
one. But again, what?
Do we not know? Did I miss that in some canon comic book or book somewhere? Like, do we not? They made it. It was a funny enough line, but I'm thinking, am I supposed to know that Worf screwed up the Enterprise E? Like,
I just thought that was in reference to them crashing it into the whatever the name of that dumb ship was.
the scimitar.
The
You're-
scimitar.
Was that him?
Ooh, the scimitar.
I thought that
Yes.
was Picard. Well, I mean, I guess, yeah. I wasn't quite sure. Like, he was just like, it's not my fault. And I'm thinking, like, wait a minute. Did I,
Yeah, but I'm just like, but you could fix the Enterprise. But I get why they did it. And again, I love seeing the Enterprise D. Okay, I'll start, seeing as I seem to have been the downer this entire episode today. Out of 7 warp cores, I will give it 5. Because, and again, Urza, I will give you this. The last episode, if it ties it all together, maybe I could have rated this one a little bit higher. But my big thing is I just feel like they've gone to the Borg well many times, and I really felt like they were getting away from it, which is what was making me so excited was they were bringing in something. Yes, it was something old, but it was something new, in my opinion, with where I thought they were going. And to just kind of, if they are completely severing this whole Changeling Dominion thing, I think they've done themselves a disservice, in my humble opinion. So 5 out of 7. I'll throw it to Lloyd, who's null and void. Go ahead, Mr. Dobler.
nice. I'm going to kickbox you. I think
Yes.
I think the power of the last 5 minutes of this show, which again is just one of several you can check off throughout the 3rd season as the moments that
Check
we
off.
Check off.
Hello.
Hello. See what I did there? I
Yes,
think
Gary.
those are the moments again that we paid our hard money to see, and to see the D
Agree.
come back out in force. I think that puts me on a 6 for this episode. But my biggest concern as the writer, and I'll be looking for clues in the finale. I know Ursa Masters, ever the optimist. I'll be looking to clues to not just push the changelings now as a convenient plot point aside, so we concentrate all our fire on the Borg, because again, and this open doors, future seasons, future whatever, we probably still have a changeling problem in Starfleet. We saw Tuvok. We've seen, various Starfleet officers, with phaser rifles transforming and getting, So I suspect that even if we are to take out, the Jack Borg and the Queen Borg and everybody else, like, we still have a changeling problem in Starfleet. We've never established. I mean, we established that there were originally 10, but since then, are there only 10? Are we now dealing in the 50s and so I think that's going to have to at least, they probably can't solve it all, but there's probably going to be like, hey, we've got a changeling problem we better take a look at. So I'm going to be anxious to see next episode if they keep those threads alive and give us an indication of what their plans are, not just say, oh, we defeated the Borg, everybody is free, so we'll see. But we'll go with a 6 for the Enterprise D.
So Lloyd Dobler, in so many words, has said that he enjoys the D at a 6.
Yes.
Oh my.
Oh my.
I struggle with this because I really do feel like episode 10 is going to be part 2. And
Say it.
it's so hard. It's so hard. Oh my. I'm also going to give it a 6 out of 7 warp core.
Oh, just
And here's why it's not a 5.
yes.
Why it was almost a 5.
Yes.
It's not a 5 because the Enterprise D reveal for me was very unexpected. I actually expected them to go back and get Kirk's Enterprise.
Ooh.
Because we didn't see the Enterprise there before. I really thought that they had to go so old. Let's go get Kirk's Enterprise because they'll never expect that, which would have been, tremendous. Honestly, I think that would have been incredible. Or I thought maybe they would take one of each ship.
Yes.
And everybody grab Voyager and Kirk's
You get an
Enterprise and
Enterprise.
the,
You get an
the Bird of
Enterprise.
Prey. Right,
Well,
exactly.
I thought they were going to take the Titan and do that originally, quite honestly. I thought they were going to go back and then divide up the Titan crew onto those ships and would have gone.
I think that could have been interesting.
Yeah.
So for that reason alone, because it's very hard to surprise anybody in shows these days, especially with all the fan theories floating around, people eventually get it right. And unfortunately, a lot of people got this one right. But the reason it's not a 7, and the reason it was almost a 5, was killing off Captain Shaw.
Oh.
Don't get me wrong. I feel like that character had good finality and a great story throughout. I'm not saying his story was bad. I'm just saying that it was unexpected for it to be cut short like that. Although it does set up 7 for her own series, which I think would be great.
Right.
I really expected them to kill Rafi in that moment, and I was not going to be heartbroken about it. No offense to Rafi, the actress who plays Rafi, incredible, did an amazing job in season 2, and season 1 I enjoyed. I just have not dug her this season. She's been a narrative device, and that's about it. I give it a 6 too because I think there's very high potential with what they could do with the last episode, and the way that they've set Jack up with this bravado of I can overcome the Borg gives me some excitement that may come to fruition. Now, I'm expecting it, so if they swerve away from that and it becomes a father has to kill son, was it Abraham moment? That could be cool. I mean, that could be really, for American television and cinema, that would be incredible complexity. We don't see that often, and I would be very into that.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
Do you think we'll see Wesley in the final episode staring off in the distance like he's one of the Jedis, like he's an Obi-Wan Yoda,
Force Ghost.
going oh?
I was thinking,
Yes.
like Force Ghost.
Yes.
Force Ghost. Wesley.
Or do you
That's
think we
more-
just see him in general?
Wesley, Cora, I mean, Julio Gonzalez. What was his name? I feel really bad about this. From season 2, Esteban. What's his name?
Oh, the guy. I know who you're talking
Rios.
about. Oh, I'm drawing a blank too.
Rios
Rios,
Yes.
Captain Rios.
Yes.
Yes, Rios.
with the
Sorry.
save.
I was thinking Julian Casablancas for some reason, but yeah, Rios. Yes, he stayed back in time, but could there be something there too? Again, my money's on Girardi and the new Borg.
That would be great.
I think they still have a role to play. They were monitoring an anomaly in the Alpha Quadrant. What is that anomaly? I mean, there's that open question leaves me with enough where I'm very excited for the next episode. And I do think that are these, travelers that anomaly? Are they going to come through and say, all right, the Borg have grown too powerful. Now we have to step in and actually take action. And maybe that has something to do with something. And I think, in a way, as frustrating as this episode could be, I have to admit, it does leave me with the feeling like, wow, I really don't know what's going to happen next. And that, again, is very unusual for television and movies now. End of Endgame, I kind of knew, spoiler alert, Tony Stark was probably going to die.
No.
What? Sorry, couldn't help myself.
So, but I still think, this is my fan theory there, I still think the AI Tony Stark is going to come back in a future movie. It's going to happen. It's going to be Robert Downey Jr.
Yes.
It's just going to happen because it would make so much sense
And he
and
needs to
fit
get
so
paid.
perfectly into this phase.
And he'll make 150 million. So yeah,
Easy.
easy.
And who doesn't want to see Robert Downey Jr. literally do anything? I would watch the man eat a Snickers bar. I mean, he could be in the next Star Trek show for all I care. As Tony Stark, why not?
Patton Oswalt.
So,
Oh, and real quick, last thing, Brett Spiner in this
Close it
one,
up.
he was terrific. The comic
I
timing,
prefer this data over any other data. I love what they've done with him, and he is just his acting has been.
I hope we die quickly. Like that
So
was. Jordy's like, can you be more of an optimist? Like just the delivery, like I said, like this was great. This was so much better than a forced emotion
Yeah.
chip. Like kind of although we did do the life form song, I know, but yes, this is peak
Right.
Spiner there.
Yeah, I agree.
wonderful. The one thing I will say is no matter how this series concludes in episode 10, it's a cinematic masterpiece, this whole season. I mean, even if it leaves us feeling a little bit perhaps incomplete or perhaps like it could have been better, how many other things have we talked about? The greatest trilogy of all time. We talk about it all the time, how Star Wars has its weak points. It's still like cinematic history. Even, hell, I'll do it. I'm going to do it. Even the prequel trilogy with Jar Jar Binks. Even that is film history. Now, there's a lot to take issue with, but that doesn't mean we didn't get Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, arguably the only two characters worth having, and a 10, 11-year-old me with a giant crush on Natalie Portman for life because of those movies. So, that being said, we go forth to our 19th episode next week into the final frontier of Star Trek Picard. I look forward to it. I'm sure we're all looking forward to it. But the question remains, not just how Picard will conclude, but how episode 20 of the Warp Core podcast will resume after such an epic journey into that final frontier. Stay tuned with us. Make sure to drop us your comments here on YouTube. Make sure to hit up digitалescapepod.com. Check out all of our stuff. Follow us, Digital Escape Podcast, on YouTube. You can definitely check me out, Urza Master, on Facebook and YouTube. You can check out Lord Uther on Facebook and YouTube. There's nothing there, but you can check it out. And
Thank
Lloyd
you.
Dobler really needs to establish himself some social media, because he will be joining us for the future of the Warp Core podcast. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Live long.